Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Jonathan Lopez, and I decided to start a podcast called Rad Dad Podcast. And the reasoning behind that was, the pandemic hit 2+ years ago, and I had a lot of time to think internally about, who I was as a person, who I was as a father, and while I believe I'm a great dad, uh, there's some concern about how to raise a young boy into a man during crazy times like this. And what I did was I read The Boy Crisis. It kind of concerned me about how much information is in there and really how we're letting down our kids, not only from a boy standpoint, but how that affects the overall society. And it just intrigued me on how do I become a better dad, and how do I influence other people to be better dads? Spencer, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us all about who you are.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thanks for having me, man. And I appreciate what you're doing here. I think the purpose obviously is very large. And I applaud you for taking that first step, which is to actually go and do this. A lot of people have the idea to do it, and then they can never get over the hump, right, of the anxiety and the fear. But I think your purpose of doing this for, not only for your son, but also in aggregate for fatherhood, I'm glad that motivated you strongly enough to do this. So kudos to you, man. But thanks for having me on as your first guest.
No problem.
I'll be the guinea pig as you get your process down and things like that. But so who am I? My job, at least, and then we'll get into fatherhood, which is the purpose of this. But my job is SVP of sales for PlanSight, which is an RFP solution, so technology that insurance brokers use. But from a standpoint of a fatherhood, which I know we were talking today, I have a daughter who's 5, Brooklyn, and I have a son, Sebastian, who's about 19 months old. Definitely have the thoughts about how to build a young boy up into a man, and so I know we'll get into that. And I'm also a husband to Courtney Smith, who's been my wife almost 11 years now, and we've been together 16. Best years of my life as well. Couldn't do anything I'm doing without her, and obviously my kids wouldn't be around without her either.
Absolutely.
So she played an integral role in that.
What we want to discuss today, I think we talked about it before, is several different topics. Mm-hmm. Everything from fitness, fun, family, faith, finance, and really trying to pull from that knowledge that I believe, and a lot of people do, that used to be passed down to us from our dads. Like, here's how to change a tire. Here's how to balance your checkbook. Here's how to budget. But we don't talk about any of that stuff anymore. And I think the YouTube and social media world has taken over that. I mean, I had a great dad growing up, and he knows a lot of stuff about how to do it around the house. Everything from electrical work to, plumbing and pipes. And I was taught none of that.
Yeah.
So I learned from YouTube on how to be a man at home, if you will, how to fix things around the house. So, I thought it'd be a great thing to talk to people and, see, hey, what did your dad teach you, or what did your dad not teach you that you had to learn later on? And you mentioned being a former collegiate soccer player. Tell me a little bit about fitness. What would you tell your kids or kids out there about fitness, how important it is and why it's important? And, I wanted to lead off with this question because we've talked about this several times. The number one thing that the pandemic has shown us is Americans are very unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And that contributed to the death rate piling up. And, how do we become healthier? What do you do? What advice would you give to your kids?
Well, I think the catalyst for me to get interested in health, actually, I can share through a story. I was, I think, 12 years old, and we were supposed to go on a soccer trip to England. Our coach had put together this trip, and so the whole team was going to go. Obviously, we were going to turn it into a vacation with family and things like that. But about 10 days prior to that, my dad had started having heart trouble. And it was like in the middle of the night. He told my mom he was having pains down his left arm.
Oh, wow.
And goes in. He was 37 years old at the time. Goes into the doctor. Fortunately, he's okay. He's still with us today. But it was one of those scare events, right? It was a warning event for him. But it prevented him from going on our trip. So I had to go with my mom. My dad didn't get to experience it. And it was one of those, when you're very impressionable, 12, 13 years old, you're being shaped by everything right now, but it's a very profound time in your life. So I remember going, well, wait a second. Why is dad having a heart attack at 37? What did he do wrong? What are some of the things that have triggered this event to have happen in the first place? So I started reading Men's Health magazine. I started getting into nutrition. I gobbled up everything I could because I realized in that moment, hey, this thing, I controlled this. I have to take responsibility in my own health. And so even though I was already a soccer player at the time and we're generally pretty fit, like it turned into a passion of mine. I actually have a degree in exercise science as well as business because of it. And it's why I'm about to turn 40 this year, and it's why I'm still in the shape I am today. It's that moment I can draw it back specifically to that trigger. And so in terms of what I do with my kids, my wife she was a collegiate cheerleader, stays fit, still with me today. It's part of our family life. I mean, we go to Lifetime Fitness. We bring both our kids. My daughter, Brooklyn, she gets to dance and kids yoga and stuff like that. But we just made it such a part of who we are. It's a non-negotiable in terms of our, weekly life. We're going to go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week.
Yeah, so they get to see it.
Yeah, so they see it. So for us, it's not like I'm hammering to my daughter, she's 5, or my son who's 19 months, hey, what is fitness? And here's what keto is and fasting. It's more like, here's what mommy and daddy do for a regular part of our life. Sure. Set that example for them.
Oh, 100%. And for me, I used to own a CrossFit. Mm-hmm. And in CrossFit, we always talk about learning a new sport. So this past year, I really got into ice hockey and golf, or got better at golf, or still trying to get better at golf. So, but ice hockey was a big point for me to dive into it because my son plays ice hockey, and I felt ill-equipped to give him advice and coach him since I had never been on the ice and I never played. So I took private lessons for 6 weeks, 2 to 3 times a week, and he knew nothing about it.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I jumped on the ice with him to coach him and teach him. And I better understood from that kinesiology background how to move your body, what you need to do to move the puck, how to handle it, how to be better. And, I still, with my son's private lessons, I'll get on the ice with him and the coach and run through the drills myself. So not only am I getting better, but I'm setting that example for my son as well on, hey, jump into it, mm-hmm. do it. Don't just talk about it, be about it. So you want to get better, you want to do that, but at the same time, let's have fun. We incorporate fun from a lot of different aspects, and I think it's a key ingredient people forget about, that you need to have fun. You can't just do stuff because you want to do it.
Well, it has to be sustainable. You have to enjoy it, right? And that's why I feel like whether it's hockey or whether it's CrossFit or whether it's running or rowing or skiing or whatever you want to do, you find the form of physical stimuli that you're passionate about that clicks with you, but you have to enjoy it. So if you're going to do this for the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life, if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be hard to be adherent to it. So I think your point is well taken. It's like, find something you actually want to do as well, that when you do it, you're like, oh, this is fun. And sure. It makes you forget a little bit about the hard work that's involved as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 11 years in the CrossFit, mm-hmm. and it's what works best for my body. It's what I like. So that's what I do, and it bleeds into other aspects of my life on how dedicated and consistent I am with something, and again going back to fatherhood, showing that to your kids. Like, here's how you stay dedicated, you're consistent, and my growth trajectory professionally has been one that was now fueled by consistency. I am where I am because I was consistent with things. Yeah. And, that outworking mentality, and I'm just going to wake up and do my job every day and continue to grind at it, is great. But I put fun into it. And that's why I was able to stick with it and be consistent. And for instance, like my son, this past year, 6 months ago, I bought a house and we moved in. Big day for someone, right? Kids don't care. It's just a new place for them to hang out, a new place that they're living at, and they don't care. So, how I brought fun into the equation with that was, I had a Nerf gun battle with him in the new house. Before we moved in, any furniture, everything was absolutely empty. There's nothing we could have broken. And, he showed up. My mom picks him up from school every day. So she picked him up, brought him home, and I just had a little note for him on the door with a Nerf gun.
Awesome.
And, we commenced on having a Nerf gun battle, and it was fun. So, and anyone,
That's something he's going to remember the rest of his life.
he'll remember that. He won't remember me closing on the house, signing those documents, paying a whole bunch of money. He won't remember any of that, but he'll remember, hey, Dad made it fun. And, for me, it's all about creating those experiences. And that's what family is about to me, is not only the family that you're born into, but the family that you choose and how you interact with those people. And that leads me to my next question is, is blood really thicker than water? And, tell me about how you grew up and how your heritage affected that, or if it did. Or if where your family comes from.
Yeah, I do to a degree, right? I haven't done the full ancestry to like go in and say, all right, well, what percentage are we this or that? But we have an interesting kind of family history from my father's side and mother's side. But my father's side, he grew up on a potato farm in Maine, like a really small town in Maine called Presque Isle, and it's like
okay. I expected you to say Idaho, not Maine.
No, it was Maine, and like near the Canadian border, basically Canada, Maine, and so very hard life growing up. Grew up pretty poor, one of 4 brothers. Mom was educated on a 5th grade level because she had to go start to work. So, I mean, it was a rough life to grow up in. And he and one of his brothers moved down to Texas, which is how I ended up, being born in Texas where he met my mom. But I think it shaped him quite a bit of, rugged kind of man's man. He's in construction right now. Grew up poor, so he had a lot of perspective of like the value of a dollar, right? And some of the struggles that people go through. And then my mom was born and raised in Texas. She had a really good family, but father was an ex-World War II veteran. Kind of that, I don't know if you have a grandpa like this, it's like quiet grandpa that just sits in the corner and he's just gone through so much in life. He doesn't say much. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, my grandfather was the same way.
Yeah.
Same thing. World War II veteran and just kept to himself, didn't say a lot.
Yeah, so but he did all the good things for kids, like got you a bond every year for your birthday and got you life insurance. I mean, all the things that like he knew to do from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint as a grandpa. This is what you're supposed to do. But you kind of see those different father figures growing up, and I think it does shape who you are as a person. So that I mean, my parents are still together 41, 42 years now.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is amazing, right? I feel very fortunate. Both me and my 2 sisters grew up in a house where we got to see them struggle through things. We got to thick and thin. There was arguments. I mean, it wasn't a perfect home by any means, but we got to see them kind of battle through it and stick through it, and hopefully get to retire together soon one day as well. And so that's part of who I am as well. I'm very fierce about trying to go through it as long as you can. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But I think what that precedent they established for me is kind of shaped the way that I view marriage and fatherhood as well.
Yeah, I think we had the same grandpa because mine did the same. Are we related? And I've done 23andMe and Ancestry.com, and No Smiths popped up.
No,
so
there's a lot of us out there, related. But I think I've got French Canadian background, some German, some English. I'm not sure what the rest of the makeup is, but European, of course, and then Canada has a heavy French population. I think my father's mother actually did immigrate from Canada to the U.S. as well.
So tell me about what your grandfather did from the bond perspective and life insurance perspective. Did he pass that down to your dad and teach him about finances and how to invest for the future? Or was that something you just kind of took from your grandpa?
I had to kind of figure it out on my own. So that was my mother's father, the one that was the World War II veteran. I actually only met my father's father once because he was up in Maine. He passed away when I was really young, and so I didn't really have much influence from that side. But I think just because they, they were back from the era where you buy a house for $12,000 and live in it for 60 years, right?
Yes.
Like he was very regimented about his cars. He would always pay cash for his cars, and he did the math that you had to have it for 8 years for at least it to make sense to pay cash. But every month he was also paying himself like there was a car payment, so that would go into the next car's pool. So he was just very regimented, very he was a penny pincher, right? He's very frugal. That's why my grandmother was able to retire. I mean, my late grandmother, but she was able to retire, live out her days without having to worry about money, is because he just was very regimented about his finances. Didn't live a lavish life. Nothing was extravagant in anything they did, but it was very purposeful. And even on relatively, modest incomes, they were able to build a pretty nice nest egg. So I did absolutely learn from that. But when you're 7 and your grandpa gives you a $50 savings bond, you're like, oh, cool. I'd rather have a G.I. Joe.
Can I have
Thanks,
G.I.
Grandpa.
Joe? Can I have the cash?
Yeah.
So I could
But
go
then
buy
those
a G.I.
accumulate
Joe?
over time, right? And then you realize, oh, I see what he was doing now. It maybe wasn't fun or sexy as a gift when I was 7, but when you're 30 or 40, it starts to make sense. I see what he was doing to establish this precedent of how you take care of your money.
Yeah, my grandfather did the same thing. I believe it's a generational thing. I mean, they're called the greatest generation for a reason. And, they went to war for the future. Mm-hmm. And they fought for us. So it doesn't surprise me at all that both of our grandfathers invested for the future. So, one thing that I want to end pretty much every podcast with is, if you died tomorrow, what advice would you want your kids, or what would you want to give them, or what would you want them to know?
For me, at the end of the day, speaking truth and being a good person supersedes any level of monetary success you have. If you do the right things in this life, and people that when you're not there talk about you and they say good things, I think that's all that really matters. And so every day I approach life honest with the people I interact with, treat them well, smile at them, shake their hand, make eye contact, just try to leave a slightly, net positive impact to the world. And I think that's all that matters at the end of the day.
No, I absolutely love it. And I agree. Again, Spencer, thank you for being the first guest.
Thank you for having me as the first guest, man.
I appreciate it. I look forward to the next episodes and, getting together with you outside of here and discussing this even more.
Yeah, and we'll get a bone-in pork chop at Mexican Sugar.
Sounds good.
I did. Appreciate you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for joining Rad Dad Podcast, everyone. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.